Hello, everyone. My name's Sandy. Now I'll tell you one of the stories of my life. I really hope you enjoy it. In the meantime, listen and watch. Don't forget to write your opinion in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and put likes. Imagine the family you live in now, and everything seems to be perfect. There's a father, mother, sister, and you, and everything seems to be as it should be. Only you do not leave that feeling of anxiety. Suddenly, you feel that this is not exactly what you need, or rather, as if it is all someone else's, but not your life. So it was with me. I spent a lot of time thinking about my family, watching from the outside, and the more I lived in it, the more I doubted. Is it really mine at all? Yes, at first you can call it strange, like, what kind of nonsense? How can a family be a stranger? But would you be very surprised if I say that yes, it can? And now, just about this will be discussed. I'll tell you about what it means to feel out of place as well as how it is sometimes important to listen to your own feelings. That day, I opened my eyes and felt a terrible pain in my body. There were some people nearby. At first, I didn't immediately understand where I was, and only then a man in a uniform came up to me. He said that he was a doctor and that I had an accident and was now in the hospital. As soon as I wanted to get up, I was immediately slowed down. They told me not to worry, and who are you? I asked a man and a woman I didn't know. They looked at each other in surprise and asked, Don't you remember us? But I really didn't remember them. I just remembered my name, something like what I was, but I didn't remember anything else. The woman wept bitterly and then went off to talk to the doctor about something. Later, I was told that I had injured my head, and because of this, I now have problems with my memory. But there's hope that it will return. You just have to wait. Those two introduced themselves as my parents, and I even felt uneasy. It's weird not to remember my parents. I lay there for many days, and then they let me go home. As soon as I opened the door, I heard of cheers, Sandy! Finally you're home! And a girl ran at me. She was younger than me. She immediately started kissing me and hugging me, but I couldn't remember her. This is your little sister. Her name is Zoe, my mother had said. I smiled faintly and asked to be shown my room. As soon as I got in there, I closed the door behind me and I started looking at it. It all seemed so strange. Why did I choose this room and put the bed by the window? I don't like sleeping by the window. And this ugly table and lamp. Why did I love all of this before? I immediately began to make a rearrangement. My parents came in running to the noise. When they saw this, they forbade me to lift heavy things, and my father said that he would do everything himself. We immediately did everything as it was more convenient for me. The room looked better now. A couple of hours later, when I finished everything, took a shower and sat in front of the mirror. I was horrified. I just had terrible hair. I had looked at myself and couldn't figure out what was wrong. Why am I so uneasy? And when I looked in the mirror, I suddenly felt pain. The seam of my forehead hurt, which I had hit during the accident. It was terrible, a sharp flash of memory. I was in the back seat of the car. Screams. My mother was sitting in front of me, and she screamed and told me to duck. I closed my eyes and, Sandy, is everything all right? My mom said. I jumped out of fear, and then I asked, You were with me too. And you're all right. My mother hesitated a little, paused, and then said that by a miracle everything was fine, and then she invited me to dinner. There were a lot of goodies on the table, and they poured me an orange juice. By the way, I couldn't stand it. I always drank only cherry. I asked for water, and I didn't mention it. After dinner, I went to my room to sleep. All night I dreamed about the moment with the accident, and I screamed in my sleep. I didn't see my mother's face, I just heard her voice, and it was different. It seemed strange. The next day, I asked if I went to school, and my mom said that Zoe and I went together. At school, everything was no less strange. Almost no one knew me, and Zoe said that I had recently transferred. Why, she did not say. All these things bothered me, and I thought more and more about my vision of the accident. So it took about 6 months. At first, I thought it was me, my condition, my experience of the accident, but then something happened. One day, Zoe didn't go to school with me, so I went alone. I decided to take a different route. I wanted to take a little walk. On my way to class, I wandered into a street that looked familiar. Sandy, is that you? A girl asked me. She ran up to me and started kissing me, hugging me, and then I realized I didn't recognize her. I explained about the memory problems, but her face seemed like that, as if I knew her. I'm your best friend, Mary. Don't you remember me? She asked, but my mom said I didn't have any friends, just Zoe. She started asking me how I was doing, how I was feeling, and then she asked me why I left home. I didn't leave. I live where I lived, I said. Your house was recently sold. I'm sorry about your family, she told me. Just as I was about to ask a question, Zoe was there. She took my hand and ran, saying we were late. Mary was left behind, and we didn't even say goodbye. I had more questions. I didn't know what to do. At dinner that night, I asked my mother about the accident, but she said that she didn't want to remember it. But you were there. How did you not get hurt? I remember the truck coming our way. I shouted, and my mother got angry. She slammed on the table and shouted back, "Aren't you glad that I'm all right?" I replied that I just wanted to understand what happened, to which my father said that he would stop living in the past. It stung me, and I got angry. I said everything I thought. "Where are my photos?" I asked them. They were surprised and asked what kind of photos. I explained that there were only photos of Zoe and not just of me everywhere in the house. My mother said that when they had been lost in the move. When asked why I don't have friends, she said that I'm not sociable. And when I asked why I don't really have things on my size in my closet, nasty floral wallpaper, why there's no music on my computer, and my mother said that I did it myself. It all seemed so strange, and I couldn't calm down. I screamed as if something had possessed me. And then I said I didn't feel like they were my family, and I got slapped on the face by my mom. I started to cry, and then I ran into the room. My mother ran after me, and on the way, I slipped and fell on my head on the floor. The sharp memories hit me like a slap in my mother's face. I was driving in the car with my mother. We were listening to music loudly, and then a truck suddenly rushed at us. Our car skidded in the snow, and the only thing my mother said to me was, "Close your eyes." And suddenly I saw her. I saw my mother's face. It was different, or rather, it was a different person. I opened my eyes abruptly and saw a stranger standing over me. It was definitely not my family. I sat down and asked, looking into my mother's eyes, "Where's my mother?" She almost fainted from this question, but now everything was coming together. Now I knew for sure that this was not my family, but why did they lie to me? Dad calmed me down, sat me on the couch, and they told me I was right. From their words, I learned that my mother was killed in that accident, and I was left alone. This family is my mother's best friends, and my mother's request was that they take care of me. Understood that you would not accept us, and that you would want to live like this now, that you would miss her. And when the doctor said that you had lost your memory, I suddenly thought, why don't we? And she didn't finish, and I interrupted her. Why don't you lie to me? My mother stood up for me. He said that they wanted what was best for me. They wanted me to not be hurt, and they wanted me to start a new life. At first, I hated them so much. I felt cheated. I wanted to cry. I hadn't spoken to them in days, and then my fake mom invited me for a ride. She took me to my mother's cemetery where I finally saw her face in the photo. I cried so hard. And then I was given a look at her message, her last words before she died. She asked me to be strong, to live with her friends, and she said she loved me. And after that, I realized that I should be grateful to this family for not leaving me alone. We've been living closer together ever since. I miss my mom so much, but she asked me to move on.
Hi everyone, my name is Duke. Just recently, I literally back from the dead. You know, no one expected or believed, except for one person. Now I'll tell you who it is and how it all happened. I hope you enjoy my story, but first, I'm waiting for your likes, comments under the video at the end of viewing, and please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. I grew up in a rich family. I had everything that my age guys can only dream of. I got my first car worth an apartment, and that's not all. Yes, my parents are fabulously rich. They have several businesses, and they have 2 kids who are like me. Besides me, by the way, there is a daughter. My sister's name is Dakey. Do you want to know what it is? In short, she's a bitch. Dakey also loved not only expensive things, but also people. In short, she did not communicate with poor people. She was not the kind of friend who would comfort you when you were in a bad way, or help you in a difficult moment. She did not show her emotions to anyone, but she did not perceive other people's emotions either. As for me, I was a little bit different. Yes, I was like a kinder side, more understanding, although I was also considered a star, and brash, and a bully. At least my friends liked me better, I knew that, than my friends' girlfriends. Our parents are very busy people. They are almost never in our mansion. Fortunately, we have a lot of servants, and we do not do any chores around the house at all. Our mother owned a whole chain of luxury clothing stores, and she constantly flew somewhere to bring clothes from abroad. My mother wasn't very sentimental either, but my sister took after her, and I, as you may have guessed, look more like my father. Funny and interesting, but the men in our house have a bigger heart than the women's have. When I was a child, someone hurt my sister or me. We ran to my mother to complain, and I got even more from her for allowing such an attitude to myself, and another slap for not being able to solve the problem on my own. It was pretty cruel, but we quickly learned not to tell her anything else, not to complain, and generally to pretend that nothing was happening. But with Dad, it was completely different. Dad felt sorry for us, he kissed Dakey, and hugged me. Dad knew how to choose the right words and support in a real fatherly way. In general, we had enough love, so we grew up until we were all grown up. So one day, I came home drunk enough, I just felt bad. To be honest, I could barely stand on my feet and miraculously got home by car. As soon as I fell into the room and lay down on the bed, my sister called me. For some reason, she was crying and asking for help. I immediately seemed to sober up. I was afraid for her. She asked me to come, and of course, I left immediately. I don't remember exactly how fast I was going, but I was going fast. I remember how I almost got there, how I picked up the phone to check the address with the neighbors. As soon as I unlocked my phone, I saw that some guys and Dickie were standing by the road. She was crying. Out of anger, I wanted to run over them. I drove even more and lost control. The car overturned and crashed into a tree. I remember opening my eyes, hearing my sister's voice calling for help, and then I had a dream. I dreamed a lot of things, including the moment of the accident. I was trying to avenge my sister. Dickie was crying all the time. I could clearly hear her voice in my sleep. She was asking for forgiveness, and it was so sad. I heard my father's voice, my friend's voice, and then I heard my mother come to me. I also thought that the pancake is going to hit me even more. And the most amazing thing is that I heard her crying. Can you imagine how surprised I was when I first heard her cry? I was used to the fact that my mother's reputation as an iron lady, and it was like this at work, stone as a rock. I heard it many times, and then thought I heard strange voices. I didn't know them. I didn't really understand the speech of strangers, but I still had a dream. It was so long. And then one day, when I'd had a good sleep, I heard my mother crying again, and she was crying as hard as she'd ever cried before. She asked me to come home. I was surprised, because did I sleep somewhere outside the house? I opened my eyes, saw a bright light, and my eyes hurt. I wanted to ask them to close the windows, but I suddenly realized that I couldn't speak because I had something in my mouth. I took a deep breath through my nose and started coughing. At this moment, my mother screamed like a madman. She flew up to me and started shouting my name. Then she ran around the room and shouted someone's last name. Immediately a man came running. He pulled all the excess out of my mouth, believed the vital signs, shone flashlights in my eyes, felt my hands, and asked me to tell my name. I answered all the questions and then asked what was going on. My mother came up to me again, and I saw a very old woman instead. Her hair was almost gray, bags under her eyes. She had lost so much weight. I said, "Mom," and she rushed back to me. She was crying and happy, and I couldn't understand what was going on. Finally, after some time, a stranger came up to me again, and he told me that I had an accident while driving for my sister. I lost control of the car and it rolled over. I ended up with a head injury and went into a coma. "You were in a coma for 10 years, the doctor said. The words hit me like an arrow, and I was scared and panicked. I was in a coma? Why 10 years? Have I lost so much time? I asked myself. I was released from the hospital not immediately, only a week later. The news about me spread around the city, but my mother decided not to accept anyone from the guests yet. I saw my father. My sister begged for forgiveness. As it turned out, I had not dreamed it before. I heard it all. I calmed her down because I really didn't hold a grudge against her. A couple of days later, we went out for a walk and talked about a lot. I noticed that it wasn't just my mother who had changed. Dickie also became more human and sentimental. She told me that on the day I woke up, the doctors had already suggested that my mother turn off the machine that I was using to breathe, because I couldn't do it on my own. Parents' permission was required. My father was ready to sign the paper because he couldn't torment me anymore, but my mother, she didn't agree. She believed in me and shouted that even if I lay in this state for another 30 years, she would agree. Just then, I opened my eyes. You know, it was a real miracle. There are probably 1 in a million cases like me. Despite the fact that I missed so much in life, I now have the opportunity to make up for everything. Plus, the whole situation is that I got to know my mother and sister from the other side, and my mother's love and faith in me did not allow me to die. And this is magical.